Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Cuddy from the Chicago Humanities Festival, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you to this program, The Painter and the Thief, with the painter, Barbora Kysilkova, and Janine Myleaf, who is the Executive Director of the Arts Club of Chicago. I want to apologize that we're a few minutes late. We were having some technical difficulties. We hope those will resolve, but just be patient throughout the program. This technology can be a little shaky sometimes, but we'll do our best to keep it going. Apologies also, the director, Benjamin Ree, was unable to join us today due to illness. So if you haven't had the chance to watch the film before this conversation, fear not, you will be able to watch it afterward. And also I think it's such a provocative film and raises so many different questions. It's going to be a provocative conversation today. When the programming team at CHF was talking about this film, we had a really wide-ranging conversation about it. It's such a pleasure to work with a group of people who bring so much energy and passion to ideas and to themes. And that is, in a microcosm, what CHF does, which is to gather people together in conversation across our differences in the hopes that we can have some kind of shared experience. We think that's a great cultural experience, but it's also a civic good. And we're thankful for you for participating in it today. We hope that you will join us for other programs coming up, from John Dickerson next week to another neighborhood check-in with youth activists coming up later this summer, and a really interesting conversation about the first all-Black high school crew team. It's a Chicago story based right here in the East Garfield neighborhood at Manley High School. That'll be a great conversation. So join us for those. Become a member, donate. If your membership is expired, consider re-upping it now. It's a great time to be part of CHF. The format for today is that Janine and Barbara will be in conversation, and then they will take questions. You can share those questions in the chat channel on YouTube. I want to thank our captioner, Joe Gale. If you are in need of captioning, just turn on the closed caption button in YouTube and you'll be able to see those. Thanks to Neon Films for making such really interesting films and for working with us on this program. I would definitely encourage you to check out more of their work. And thanks to CHF staff. We're all going through incredible changes right now. I don't think when we started doing this online programming, any of us thought we would still be largely isolated 3 months later, but here we are. And what's happening in the world, the pandemic and social uprising, isn't something happening outside there, it's happening to all of us. And so I appreciate CHF staff for showing up, continuing to work, continuing to make programs. And so I hope you express your gratitude to them as well. And thanks again to you all for being here today. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Barbara and Janine for a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. And thank you to the Chicago Humanities Festival for having me. And thank you so much, Barbara, for being here to talk about your work. Where are you joining us from?
So it's been my pleasure, and it is my pleasure, of course, to be here. I'm sorry if the connection will be a little bit problematic. I'm in Prague, so I'm in very different part of the world, and I'm in a cafe because the thing is, I actually spent the last 3/4 months in Swedish forest with my boyfriend. But as soon as the borders from Germany to Czech Republic opened, I took a chance and I came here to see my family. So right now I'm actually having my brother here with our friends. So I'm in the center of Prague in the cafe. So I'm sorry if you might hear some sounds sometimes. I'm doing my best.
It's great. We'll roll with it however it goes. So I sort of feel like I know you already, although this is our first actual conversation. You don't know me, so I have a bit of an advantage there, and I apologize for that.
Not your fault.
Yeah. So let's actually start with that idea. As a portrait painter, you've probably thought a lot about what it is to make a portrait, but how was it to be the subject of a portrait film?
Of course, this totally was my very first experience of such. I mean, I did have some few times before a camera facing me that was like for some short reportages for TV about my art or my exhibition. But this was, of course, something totally different, because suddenly here you had a person that followed you with the camera for 3 years of your life. So now, actually reflecting back on that time, the only thing I can say is that I really have so seldomly noticed any around, because Benjamin, the director, which also was very big partly a photographer, is such amazing, sensitive and careful person that you really stop noticing him around. So the life just simply really rolls on, whether there is or is not a camera. And I myself was actually surprised seeing the film that actually, oh yeah, of course, the camera was there at that time when I saw the scene captured. So somehow
it was really there
it
at
really,
some amazing moments. You can't believe what got covered for the film. It's incredible. Did you feel exposed after the fact?
I sort of knew what I'm signing up for, of course,
Yeah.
together with Bertil, when we both decided to go for the movie, to say yes to Benjamin. And there, I just want to say there was a really wonderful talk we once had with Bertil, me and him, that was without the camera. And we asked each other why we decided to say yes to Benjamin, to start to film us. And I said to Bertil that I truly did it for him and for the story of his life, where I believed that this guy really deserves to be seen, for Christ's sake, for the first time of his life. And Bertil said that, well, I did it for your art. So, that was kind of like a nice moment where we just looked at each other, smiled, and opened new beer and moved on. But of course I felt exposed, but I cannot here not to compare myself with how much Bertil exposed of his life, to the whole world, or to everyone who wants to watch the movie. So I actually felt like I'm totally that just tries to, like, let's say Bertil was really on a total life roller coaster, and I kind of tried to make the ups and downs a little bit smaller, or to make it a little bit more bearable. So I have to say that seeing what Bertil exposed and what we see of his privacy, then I am sort of, how I feel of myself, I'm this kind of boring character that just spends days and nights at the studio, and there's not much to hide, sort of.
Yeah. It's very poignant that you say you both thought of each other for the reason to make the film. I mean, there's a lot of generosity between the two of you that is quite striking, and you feel that truth of what you said throughout the film. And normally I would ask Benjamin, how did the film get started? But actually, even before he got sick, I was planning to ask you this question, which is that the film has a kind of prehistory, right? Where you already have captured footage before the film was an idea, before Benjamin had heard of you. And so that was so striking to me. Had you already been thinking of your life in the third person? How did you have all that early footage?
That's a very clear explanation, and we don't really need Benjamin for that. So the thing is that when I moved to Oslo, that was from Berlin, where I lived for 7 years. And I was actually offered to stay to kind of have my first year in Norway at the studio of a very dear friend of my boyfriend. Her name is Merete Morken Andersen, exquisite writer, Norwegian writer. And she lives in a kind of side of Oslo, and she has a house with a garden, and she also has a kind of atelier space there.
Okay.
And so she offered me to use this space. And so this is where we started to also get to know each other. And at that time, she was writing a biography about one Norwegian female author from the 19th century. And she kind of expanded this project into kind of general artistic research. She was really interested in following up a creative process, whether it was a music composer or a visual artist or a writer. And I was kind of easy victim for her because I was every day at her studio. So this really was a footage you made for her purpose, for her use. And of course, we could have never, ever thought about 1% of how this material.
That is amazing.
So that was the idea or expectation ever.
And then how did Benjamin get involved in making the film?
So that was also, let me take you a little bit more back to the very day of the robbery, which was April 2015. So my boyfriend, who is also exquisite Norwegian writer, has a total feeling for a story. And so when this robbery happened and we got to know about it, so he right away started to tip media about that. Mm-hmm. And there is not usually so much things happening in Norway, so this was quite easily big news. So big media covered it. And then actually a few months later, one of the main Norwegian newspaper decided to follow up when they realized that I actually befriended one of the thieves. So they wrote a quite long article about that. And this is what Benjamin saw and read. And that's how he got to know about our story. So he got in touch with me right away. And that was a question of actually a couple of hours to start the filming. So he came in a very early stage of me and Bertil. We were really getting to know each other with Bertil at that time. We met very few times with Bertil. So I think you can really see the growth and the development of the friendship between Bertil and me. Like he really stepped into us at the very beginning.
Yeah, he was like a silent third partner in the relationship. And it was amazing, some of the moments that he was able to be part of. And yeah, I had actually thought in the beginning that your partner was the filmmaker until I read more and understood, because he was so present and then also until your stories diverged a little bit. And then I was like, oh no, there's a filmmaker behind this. So it was like, it was part of the family somehow already. Okay, so let's talk about your painting. So may I have the first image, please? I was surprised. So you talked about how those early kind of images of you making the painting existed, even though the painting were missing, and that's such incredible luck. And I was struck by how you actually made the image, which is that you worked up certain areas to a finish, and others were white still and unpainted canvas. Could you just tell us a little bit about your painting process, because you don't dwell on that in the film, actually?
At this moment, I must say I have very, very strangely bad internet connection. Could you maybe...
yeah, just say again. Just tell us how you paint.
If you could maybe say your question again.
Yeah, my question was, just tell us a little bit about how you
I paint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you really want my answer, then we need more than half an hour. I can talk for days and days about it.
That's why we're here. We won't have that much time.
But you're asking about the kind of technical aspect of it?
Yeah.
So, of course, I would very much love to have Bertil or any of my subjects sitting at my studio for 8 hours every day. But I fully accept that we do no longer live in a Renaissance time. We live in the 21st century, where I can't ask people for that and I can't pay them for this. So I do, of course, start with the actual watching of the person, like to get the visual memory of the shapes of the face. And of course, something you cannot get in any other way than with a direct meeting, which is to get kind of the chemistry and the vibration of the person. And then I do take a camera and I take a lot of pictures, a lot of photos. And for me, it's sort of like a starting building material, which I start with. So with this kind of help of the photographies that I have around, so I start to build on the first composition. And then the painting starts to take over itself. I kind of do no longer need really the kind of the picture model, and I really have the painting doing its own work. And then sometimes when I need to come back, because the way how I paint, you could sort of describe as realistic. So I do love to keep the rules of the lights and shades. When the painting gets a bit too wild, I come back to the picture just to make sure how the actual lights and shadows and colors are. This is kind of the technical part, but then there is also another very essential moment, which became very clear at the moment when I invited Bertil to my atelier for the purpose of starting to paint. And when this happened, I actually looked at this whole situation from kind of outer perspective, where I understood that, am I really about to invite the thief of my art into my atelier? You know? Yes, I did. And it really worked out so well, because it was not only me who were insecure. I mean, Bertil must have felt very insecure and very, you can imagine that what was going on in his mind must have been even much more of a mess. But it took us, let's say, maybe 1 hour until where I realized that he started to kind of put away his self-protective layers and all these masks and the kind of protection thing. And he started to show me a little bit what he is. Yeah. And there, I believe, I managed to catch this moment. And probably that was also the reason why he reacted as he did when he saw the portrait. And as he said, that he felt this was the first time that somebody have seen him. So when I got that feedback from him, I really felt like I might have probably done a good job.
Yeah, you're an incredible observer, and somehow, and then the skill to make it there and present. Why did you in your life turn to a hyper-realist style like that? What is it about that mode of painting that attracts you?
If I may correct you here a little bit about the term hyper-realist. Yeah. There's a difference between being a realist painter and hyper-realist. Hyper-realist is where you really go nerdy into every wrinkle, every skin pore, every hair. And it sort of, in my perspective, denies the facts. What I hope that I can say about myself, that I'm a realist painter. My paintings are realistic, not hyper-realistic. I still want to, of course, show that this is the medium of oil paint. It's not something that tries to look like a photography or like the hyper-reality. But I love to admit the imperfection of a human hand trying to paint something that actually exists. But this is, something I've always really, since early childhood, felt that this is something that really speaks to me the best when I was drifting through art history books. Of course, I also saw Kandinsky and Rothko and Impressionists, but I always were returning to what I now know is a Renaissance time, 15th century, especially 16th century. So, and it gets more and more confirmed to me that, as you said, that I'm the observer. So I'm kind of a voyeur, that's my work. And I kind of work 24/7 with this. You always need to have your senses ready to catch what you see, because you never know when you see something that this is going to be your next painting. And I just do notice, and the film proves it that much, that actually life and the reality is so full of amazing things that you could never invent. Yeah. They would not work invented. No. You could not invent the story of the painter and the thief, as much as I could not invent a better subject of my painting than what I actually see.
I'm going to follow up on that idea then. You said that, there's that relationship between you and the subject, and it was very striking. Can we look at the second image, actually? And you say it kind of out loud in the film that you're shifting a historical relationship in terms of gender, right? So it's the kind of grand tradition of painters is that you have these male painters who are with these like women as their muses in front of the canvas. And you have this moment in the film where you say to him, aha, like you're my victim now, not really in such aggressive terms, but you're like, wow, you've submitted yourself to me. Were you conscious of that shift? And as the film took form, was that something that interested you?
I, in general, have a little bit insecurity about this whole kind of gender issue of of all these things. I do not consider myself as a female painter. I consider myself as a painter.
Mhm.
And so, of course, I cannot deny the history. And yes, most of the names we these are male names. But I am not occupied by this at all. It's really for me not some kind of obvious target aim to go for. So yes, we do have indeed a painter which happens to be a woman, and her muse is a man. But I don't like to really underline this so much. I don't like to put big emphasis on this. I'm sorry, I cannot really go deeper in it because
I think that's fine. I like your answer actually, but then I do want to talk instead of about gender, about
art,
power.
I believe in art as such.
I'm sorry. Did I cut you off? We had a bit of a lag there. You're a bit frozen. I'm going to restate the question and you can say if you heard me. I was just saying I appreciate you're kind of resisting the point about gender, but then I did want to ask you about power. Because
I'm sorry, I totally dropped off, but now I'm back.
Okay, good. All right, so I'll say it one more time. So I was appreciating your resisting the question about gender, but then I did want to ask about power, because there is a power relationship then between artist and model, regardless of gender. And a quote that I picked out and then noticed had been picked out many times before from the film is when Bertel says to the camera, she sees me very well, but she forgets that I can see her too. And so there's a constant shifting of the power relation, who's the subject and who's the observer, and who's gaining something from the other one. This keeps switching, and it also switches in the structure of the film, actually, the way it's put together as a piece of art. So I thought maybe you would talk a little bit more about that.
I will, and very much with pleasure. Of course, what we speak about here now is me as a painter and Bertil as my muse. Yeah. But this is kind of it's not the main track here for me, and I dare to say for Bertil either. We are foremost friends. And friendship is a highly mutual thing. So there is no power game in friendship. Indeed, that's true that for a few years, because of Bertil's life situation where he really was not his best shape, it just happened much more often that I sort of had to be there for him and could not really demand much of him to be there for me as a friend. And I accepted it because that's how the situation was at that time. And I had absolutely no doubt about that this is how it should be. And that's how, of course, I agree on this moment that you pointed out when Bertil started to build himself back on his feet, and he could sort of then be there also for me, that he was not only dealing with his own issues, but he had started to have a space for somebody else in his life as well. And that's what we probably see at the second half of the movie, where he then can, or where I can totally feel and see that he is there for me as well. So when I first time saw this scene that you described, where Bertil says that he knows that I see him, but whether I'm aware of that he sees me too. When I saw this scene, which was the first time at the Sundance Film Festival, I actually started to cry because I didn't see this part before. And I really understood that it was truth, even if he did not express it, because he had enough of his own issues. But actually, it's true, he did see me. He was fully aware of how I am, how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about. And so he was very emotionally involved, but he did not really express it. He kept it very much inside. So it really took me a while to understand that even though I did not see him being there, he actually was there and has been always there.
Yeah, he's a very, he's just so sharp actually, isn't he? And given the challenges he's had, it's quite stunning. he actually names something about you in the film, and it's a little bit intense, and he basically kind of accuses you, not in a mean way, but of having a kind of aestheticization of his own, of trauma and this kind of, you know, beautiful suffering. And I was wondering if that was something you knew about yourself or came out in the film, and how you felt about it, hearing it, and if you think it's true.
Here, I cannot make much of a difference between me as a person and me as an artist or as a painter, because you might have understood that it's pretty mingled in thing, like me as a person and as an artist, because what I do, all of my conscious time is to paint. So it's sort of connected, and I do believe that it's of course sort of in reaction to society as such, you know, where everybody is really entertained and
When she comes,
so there I have certain duty as a painter to actually bring these things a little bit more in front of your face, to keep you confronted with it. But it doesn't mean that I have a pleasure in digging the...
Sorry, you froze for a minute. Did you just...
Okay, so what did you hear last
well,
time?
I mean, I think you're talking about your responsibility maybe as a painter to show us the suffering a little bit. Is that what I understood?
Yes, correct. Not the responsibility can be the word. It's just simply because I feel we are too much craving for entertainment, cheap entertainment, and we kind of wish to put away some kind of more serious thoughts. And in here, then Bertil really approached or touched me in a very, very deep level, because in him I felt that this man throughout his whole life, basically since the day he was born, was just loaded more and more with the utter sadness and with the absolute lack of love, with lack of any compassion from those who should be giving it to him, which starts with family, with parents, with and father. All this.
Sorry, you're frozen again. Let me start to ask a question and see if we come back. I guess I wanted to say that in the film...
Human intelligence, not intelligence that you read.
Oh, sorry, Barbara.
Okay, let me try to come closer to the...
Yeah. You're a little frozen now. One of the things that I hear you now better. You're a little bit frozen still, but maybe you can hear me. Or maybe not. I'll take a second to while we're waiting for Barbara, we can look at some of the questions. We're getting some questions from the audience. And I also had a couple more that I did want to get in. But I'm not sure if Barbara can hear us to ask her some more questions. So I will take this minute to make an editorial comment that we wanted to thank Richard Gray, the gallery, and Richard Gray for his support of the program. So thank you for that. And this is part of that series of Chicago Humanities Festival lectures that are supported by Richard Gray. So Barbara, are you with us? It's a shame to, oh wait, you're back. You're back as a different person and you're coming on as, okay, I hear you coming back in a new frame. Can you hear me? Do you have sound? Can you hear me? I see you now and you're live.
Now I can hear.
Wonderful. I did want to ask you about the risks, I mean, you cross a lot of personal boundaries as a painter, for sure. And as a,
Why do you think so?
Well, as a painter, I mean to say, if in terms of documentary filmmaker, you're not some kind of neutral, you know, observer of somebody. You're deep into the life, and your lives intertwine. And there are risks involved in that, personal risks. And I wonder if you have in the film, it gets talked about a little bit, and you're completely like, no, I don't have, you know, you're not thinking that way at all. Having seen the film afterwards, as an outsider, do you worry for yourself? Do you do you think about it at all in that way, of the risks that you took in terms of allowing the intimacy of that relationship and also the intimacy of the film?
I do think about it, what you're saying, only actually because I have my partner next to me who has been bringing up these questions. If it was just for me myself, I'm very intellectual approach to my work. It doesn't mean that my brain is off. It's very much on, but it's much more of a kind of intuitive approach. Like I sort of know, or I know what resonates for me, and I know what gives a reason to me to spend 2 months with, meaning like one painting takes me 2 months. So then you really have to make sure that it makes a reason to do that painting. And then, you know, I don't believe that art is a decoration that should just fit with the color of your sofa in the living room. I do believe that it should really challenge you as the potential viewer. It should maybe, if you allow it to come into the dialogue with you, you should let it come under your skin, and you should be willing to maybe take a look at the thing with a different perspective. And that's also what I then was saying before I sort of fell off the connection, that this kind of eternal sadness in Bertil, which is really so truly based in his bone, is something very appealing to me, because I believe it has to be shown. Yes.
So how is he doing now?
So I know now I can definitely speak for him. He's having time of his life.
Right.
First of all, he is sober for over. He is finishing his studies, bachelor degree. He is dating a woman, and he is starting to build his own home.
Beautiful.
And to watch Bertil to start to achieve all these things, this is actually the biggest inspiration ever for me, really. But it doesn't deny the thing we spoke about just a few minutes ago. So he's really doing great, and I believe this time he really started to build himself on very stable ground. So it's not some kind of a castle made of sand that will be washed off with the first wave of some kind of next trouble. Like, he really is now very, very solid.
It's actually stunning how Benjamin was able to catch that part of a life. I mean, it's just to see it at its darkest moment. And then, you know, when you start a documentary film, you can't predict where the end will go, you know, and he also could have ended the film earlier, you know, at the car crash or something, and we wouldn't have gotten to this moment with both of you. And it's quite redemptive in a way, without giving too much, you know. So, and so how are you doing?
Well, what you're describing here, I really love to kind of think about that the film had the best dramaturge in the world, and that was Bertil. Because, you know, he sort of, like, the situations he brought himself in, and therefore me and also Benjamin, it was just, you could not invent those. But now a little bit more seriously. So the reason I think why Benjamin was able to catch all these moments is for one very, very big reason, and that is he really gained our trust very fast. So when you trust the person, then you really know you don't have to act or pretend. You really are allowed to be yourself, whether it means that you're just finishing a painting, or whether it means that you are going to the rehab and on the way you were begging for drugs. This would not happen if Benjamin would not gain Bertil's trust and mine trust. So that's really big respect for Benjamin. And he was given a lot of time. I think that the actual footage, the whole footage Benjamin made is over 300 hours of material, which is probably a lot, I would imagine. So I think if the movie was not limited with what the general audience can handle, if it was up to Benjamin, the movie would be something around 7 hours. I think.
It would be one of those like real-time films. I hate to stop asking you questions because I could talk to you for a very long time, but we have some from the audience that I'll just take a minute to read and then put to you. So, well, somebody asks if the film was reenactment, but you've stated that it was all live, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So was the final scene, painting of the artist with Bertil in place of the girlfriend, contrived for the movie? I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question. Did you make that up for the ending of the film to make it so perfect?
I'm not the editor of the movie, so it was not my choice. But maybe I can.
You made the painting.
I can answer, I guess, the question there, or part of the question is about that I sort of replaced myself with Bertil's girlfriend. I'll try to answer very simple on that. At the moment when I was planning to make this picture, this painting, Bertil was together with this lady. And this painting is reference to my 2 previous paintings, which one of them is a painting called Heartbeat from 2011. And the other one is the actual still missing Chloe and Emma, because Bertil is laying on the same sofa where the 2 girls were sitting on. And when I started to work on this painting, Bertil was no longer with this woman. And there I realized also, actually, it might be a good symbolics of friendship, might be maybe longer lasting than an intimate relationship here. And at the same time, I felt it was quite a time to make a canvas where I do not only expose Bertil, but also myself. I kind of felt it's a bit like I owe this to him. And I owe this to me as well. So as a painter with the power of the creation, I decided to put myself in there because, damn it, there were so many times where I truly wondered whether Bertil's heartbeat is still there. So I think I have rights to do that.
It's a perfect counterpart to the way Benjamin structured the film, because it is exactly what you say. It's an exchange. It's always an exchange. I have a question. Someone wants to know if you ever got into any trouble with the gangster guy who you took the painting back from.
He was actually quite a sweet guy.
There you go.
Okay, he had 2 pit bull dogs, and he really was. I mean, I wouldn't like to get in troubles with him. Right. That's for sure. So, but no, I did not get into any troubles. I'm still alive.
Good. What about, let's see, somebody wants to hear you talk a little bit about empathy in painting and portraiture.
Mm-hmm. That's a very complex question, actually. And I'm not sure if I can give a sort of a short answer, but I can speak quite general about what I believe art makes true art, and whether it's a painting or whether it's a song or it's a poem, you have to have empathy. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I truly believe in that.
It's hard not to empathize with Bertil with the way that you portray him.
Well, there's surprisingly huge amount of people who never empathized with him.
Really?
You know? Oh yeah.
Well, in his life or through the film. When it's being portrayed and presented to you, it's easier to empathize through art, I think, than in life. People in life are very cold. Did I just say that? It's hard. It's sad.
If you can say it again.
Oh, I think I said that,
it's a bit frozen.
It's easier to empathize with somebody through art than in actual life. We're very cold to people in life, but you've presented him through art, and then we feel more.
I think there are so many artists walking on the streets, whether they are nurses or whether they are nuns or whether they are psychologists or just teachers. I mean, there are many very empathic people on the streets in art. Not everyone has a good luck to meet them.
That's true. There are good people. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of our time. And it was such a pleasure having this conversation with you, but also thank you for your work, for your painting on the first level and for the film on another level. It's a gift.
Thank you so very much. It really was a pleasure. And once more, sorry for the bad internet connection. That's something it's, not in our hands.
That's the truth of the moment. That's where we are in our history of the world. So take good care of yourself. Be safe.
You.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're off the